At some point in all of our lives, we have been our own worst enemy. I was trying to think of a time to tell you about and be vulnerable, and all of the ones where I'm my own worst enemy, I'm too embarrassed, but I did think of one big one. I was my own worst enemy my first semester in college. When I found out at the end of that first semester, I was on academic warning. And then I was my own worst enemy my second semester. I was on the semester system. When I found out I was on academic probation. Okay, and in school, you really have no one else to blame, right? It's just you and you. You're your own worst enemy. And the thing that makes this so memorable is not that part, it's the next part. We lived in Tucker, and I remember that specifically. My mom said she wanted to talk to me about college. So I was living at home, going to Georgia State, and so she sits me down at the kitchen table. You know, there's just certain memories that are etched in your mind. You can see the colors on the wall, and this is one of those moments. She sat me down, and I thought she was going to give me the pep talk. Like, Andy, you can do anything you set your mind to, and if you believe, you can achieve, and you can do all things through Christ. I don't know what she was going to say, but I'm ready for the, Andy, you need to buckle down. And here's what she said, and I quote, Andy, college is not for everyone. That is a direct quote. Andy, college is not for everyone. And I realized even my own mom didn't really think I had what it took to get through college. And I went from becoming my own worst enemy to becoming my own best friend because it scared me so much. Now, all of us have kind of interesting kind of look back and laugh stories, but have you ever seen anyone who did this up did this up big? I mean, they became their own worst enemy with their career or in their marriage or with their finances or a relationship with one of their children. And you stand back and you see it happening. You see it happening, kind of unrolling and unraveling. And you're thinking, you're doing this to yourself. And when you watch that, you kind of think the same thing I think. You think, well, you know what, that they may undermine their own marriage, they may undermine their own career, they may undermine their own world, their own finances, or their relationship with their kids. But I mean, I may have some interesting kind of laugh about it later stories about becoming my own worst enemy. But I would never do anything like that, right? But here's the thing that's true of all of us, and I'm talking to me as well as you. We all have the potential. I don't even know you, but this is what I know about you. Every single one of us has the potential to become our own worst enemy, right? And the reason I know that is because you, and this is all of us, but I'm picking on you for a second, you have participated in all of your bad decisions, right? You have participated in 100 of your bad decisions. In fact, I'm picking on you a little bit, and it's true with me too, that we were the masterminds behind our own bad decisions. And here's why this is a big deal. Because a single bad decision, I mean, you know this, a single bad decision is always the first step toward becoming your own worst enemy, right? It's not like it happens all at one time. It just unravels over time. And the people that you've watched become their own worst enemy in a big way. It started with small things. It started with one simple, single decision, right? Because every habit begins with the first time. And every pattern begins with the first line. And every journey begins with a first step. So we all have the potential to become our own worst enemy if we're not careful. Now, the interesting thing is, Jesus doesn't use this terminology. Jesus doesn't talk about don't become your own worst enemy. But in his teaching, he's very, very clear. In fact, in one of his most famous parables, he says this. He says, anyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice, you may remember this from childhood, anyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a man who became his own worst enemy. He didn't use that terminology. Here's how he said it. Is like a man who builds his own house. Oh, you should be commended. On the sand. Who builds his own house. Good job. On the sand. And when the storm came, he recognized he has no one but himself to blame because of the poor foundation of his home. So this is a principle. This potentially impacts all of us, and Jesus went right to the heart of it. So the first thing that we must all do to ensure that we don't become our own worst enemy is pay attention to the tension. Pay attention to the tension. Even if you are sitting alone at home in your living room, I would like all of us to say this together. Ready? Pay attention to the tension. What is the first thing you need to do to ensure that you don't become your own worst enemy? Together, pay attention. That's right. Whenever you're considering any option, any invitation, anything that comes your way, any choice that you're about to make, and if the option you're considering causes any sense of hesitation, a little bit of tension, a little bit of pause, it in any kind of way dings your conscience, stop and pay attention to that tension. Don't start selling yourself. Start listening. Don't sell yourself. Start listening. Because here's what happens, and we know this. As soon as you see something you want, as soon as you get invited to something you're interested in, as soon as there's an option that kind of inflames an appetite, as soon as you see someone that you want, what do? You do the same thing I do. You start selling yourself. You start selling yourself on this idea. And what's interesting is we lie to ourselves and then we believe our own lies. I think only human beings are capable of this. We make up things and then choose to believe the things that we made up. And here's how I know that's true. You have to be a little creative, okay? If a salesperson used the same pitch on you that you use on yourself, if a salesperson in an actual retail environment used the same sales pitch on you that you use on yourself, you would be so offended, you would walk out of that establishment, right? I mean, imagine if you're standing there to negotiate, or you're thinking about purchasing something, and they said something like this: hey, if you get home and decide you don't like it, just donate it. But how many times does that run through your mind as you're about to buy something online? But if somebody actually said this to you, you'd be like, do what? How about this? Hey, I see that you already have one that does everything this one does, but this one is newer. I mean, you would look at the person like, that's your pitch? I mean, that's it? But that's the kind of stuff we tell ourselves all the time, right? How about this? Yes, sirree, it is wrong, wrong, wrong. So just don't tell anyone. Okay, now we're going to dig a little deeper. You ready? Sure, your husband would be hurt and offended if he found out. But your husband isn't bright enough to find out. I mean, how offended would you be, ladies, if somebody said that about your husband? But what do you tell yourself when you start trying to sell yourself on a bad idea? Well, right? Okay, we're going to go both sides of this. Yes, your girlfriend would be devastated, but let's face it, she's not nearly as attractive. I mean, if somebody actually said something bad about your girlfriend, you would be so offended. But listen to the self-talk. Listen to the narrative you create. We're going to talk a lot about the narratives next time. If someone actually said to us the things that we say to ourselves to sell ourselves on a bad idea that sets us up to become our own worst enemy, we would be so extraordinarily offended. This is why you can't afford, and I can't afford, to start selling ourselves. Instead, we need to pay attention to the tension. The moment, this is the habit right here. The moment you start selling yourself, hit pause. The moment you hear, because we do this every day, we do this all the time. The moment you start creating an internal narrative as to why something is okay, or something's justifiable, or something's permissible, in that moment, we should just hit pause and say, wait a minute, I'm doing it. I'm doing that thing. I am making things up and choosing to believe them in order to do something that something in me is telling me maybe I should hit pause. Because remember this, if you don't hear anything else I say today, this is it. Remember, we rarely have to sell ourselves on a good idea, right? You rarely have to talk yourself into knowing when something is the right thing, the wise thing, the prudent thing to do. Are you selling yourself on a bad idea? Are you ignoring your conscience? Is there an internal hesitation, an internal tension, and you've just kind of pushed right by it? Are you selling yourself on an idea or a decision that's gonna follow you around for the rest of your life? That's gonna make you a liar for life? Because you're never going to want anybody to know this part of your story. And you're never going to want anybody to tell this part of your story. And one day when you have children, or one day when you have grandchildren, and you tell your story, you get to this part and you just kind of are going to have to skip over it. Are you on the verge of becoming your own worst enemy? If so, can I just make a suggestion? I'm not the boss of you. I'm not, I can't tell you what to do, but can I just make a suggestion? Would you at least hit pause? Just stop for a moment selling yourself and just listen. Listen. Listen to the wiser voices around you, and perhaps listen to that still small voice on the inside of you that's going, I don't think that's the best thing, because it may be, I don't know, just guessing, it may be the whisper of God who loves you and is doing everything he can to keep you from becoming your own worst enemy.